Months ago, I was in front of you and promised that we would do a study to try to alleviate or a long-term plan to mitigate the ongoing water problems you have in your area. This is phase 2 of the promise I made. Phase 1 was to clean up the existing area. Phase 2 was to get this study done so we can come up with a long-term plan. I just want to introduce the people here. We have John Ciccarelli, committeeman. He's on the planning board also. Mark Mayhew is our engineer from Panoni. He'll be doing the presentation. Anthony Ferraro, our administrator. And also in the back, we have Committeeman Rue here just to listen and be a part of the program. So obviously there'll be a very macro presentation here. A lot of big ideas. Some ideas that you'll see are very large in scope, and some are smaller in scope that I think that possibly we can do at a little more sooner time frame. But really it's just to be up front with you with what, as I say, rip the Band-Aid off once, give you all the news we have, and then we try and work together to come to a solution maybe down the road. We'll take some questions later. I would ask with the group of people or comments, let's try and keep it to 1 or 2 questions, maybe 3 or 4 minutes so we can get through everybody. And then if somebody has some other follow-up questions after that, we'll do that, okay? So I'll hand it over to Mark and he can get started.
Thank you, Sean. My name is Mark Mayhew. I'm an engineer with Panoni Associates. If you come out to Wednesday night Board of Adjustment meetings or Thursday night planning board meetings, you'll get to see me on those meetings as well. Hopefully this will be more exciting. As Sean mentioned, we were retained to investigate and study the Green Hills area flooding issues. The area is generally bounded by Dukes Parkway East, and then it encompasses the homes within Johansson Avenue and Taylor Avenue, as shown on this exhibit. This is a close-up of the study area, shaded in red October for the Phillies. And I want to give you an update on, as the mayor said, where we stand right now. We've prepared and developed background data and have submitted a study to the township, which I believe they'll be sharing shortly. We've identified problems. We've developed a list of mitigation options, which we're going to discuss this evening. One of those options is cleaning and clearing stormwater head walls and channels, which the township has already done, as you may be aware, about a year ago. We're at the point now where we're investigating the options, costs, and feasibility of the different alternatives, and then we'll be pursuing with the township the best value option. Let me start with a flood insurance map, as many of you might be familiar, prepared by FEMA, and it's called the Flood Insurance Rate Map. And you'll notice that a large portion of this area in question is within the 100-year floodplain. It's highlighted or shaded in the blue color. This map was issued back in 2007 by FEMA, and at that time they identified a 100-year flood elevation of 48. I guess the highlighter doesn't want to show up on the screen, but here's elevation 48, and it comes down and encompasses almost all of Kimberly Road. The black dotted shaded area is what's identified as the 500-year storm. And one thing I want to clear up is a 100-year storm doesn't mean that it only occurs once every 100 years. It means there's a 1% chance of that precipitation event occurring in any year. And I think many of us have seen that 1% chance happening more frequently than once every 100 years. And you'll see in our recommendation that it's quite possible, since the mapping is 16, 17 years old almost, that FEMA may need to be updating this mapping. We're going to discuss recommendations that were identified in the study that we submitted to the township. And I've listed here a half dozen recommendations that are worth considering. The first one is the maintenance of existing structures. And we're going to go through and talk about each of these. I have a slide for each option. So rather than reading through all of these right now, I'll read through each one as we go along. The first option was maintaining the existing structures. As I pointed out, about a year ago, the township contracted to have the major ditch and head walls cleared, the ditch that runs west of the rear of the property line of Johansson Avenue. And I could find an exhibit, and I'll have to point to it, but the channel we're talking about, as many of you know, there's a head wall up on Magna Lane that picks up a significant amount of rainfall, discharges it to a ditch that runs through the woods. That ditch then runs west past a detention, which is a private detention basin off of Harvard Way, makes a hard 90-degree turn. It enters a graded head wall into a 36-inch pipe, and then that 36-inch runs down, turns into a 42-inch, and continues to run all the way out and discharges out by Dukes Parkway to the Raritan River. There's also a ditch that runs along for about half of that distance, as many of you know, since you're all from that area. And I'm sure some of you, your backyards were impacted by that cleaning operation. But a major impact to the flooding, localized flooding, is the graded head wall back at this point right here. And I'm sure, as you know, if that head wall is blocked, the water coming off of Magna Lane has nowhere to go but into the rear yards and into the ditch. And hopefully you've seen some positive results in the last year. The next option, R2, is addressing the existing detention basin that I just spoke of. It's a private detention basin. The township has been contacting and working with the owner of that detention basin to maintain it, to reconstruct it to its original approved condition, which means addressing the spillway, the berms, the outlet structure. Because of the lack of maintenance by the owner of that basin, some of it's reverted into wetlands, and that requires permitting from the DEP before they can do that work. But I've been told that they've submitted the permits to the DEP, and I'm waiting for the permits to do the work on site. In our list, option 3 has to do with installing mechanical devices to the outfalls. As I mentioned, that 42-inch pipe runs down to Dukes Parkway East and empties into the Raritan. There are 3 other head walls that pick up storm pipes within the development. They also discharge to the river. And as you can imagine, when the river water level rises, it submerges those outfalls and can in fact produce a backwater effect where water is moving back up the pipes into the neighborhood. A check valve would essentially close and prevent that water from flowing back up into the pipes. But if a significant head upstream is created, it can push water out. And it's one of the options that we're investigating. The next option has to do more with safety than actual flood prevention, and that's the introduction of an emergency access road. You can see the roadway would start at the cul-de-sac on Johansson Avenue. It would require an easement between 2 homeowners, and it would then extend into township-owned property and would go up to Brooks Boulevard. The roadway would only be used in emergency situations when Dukes Parkway East is preventing access to the neighborhood. It would not be a permanently paved road. It would be porous pavers or some type of geotextile that would support vehicle loads, but it would also be green in nature. The next option that we're going to investigate farther is introducing site stormwater storage. As you know, in the 50s and 60s when developments were built, essentially stormwater was put into inlets and pipes and sent on its way. Starting in the 80s, engineers started building detention basins to try to restrict the flow and let it leave the site at the same rate that it experienced in a pre-developed condition. And then later in the early 2000s, we started trying to recharge stormwater, and then we also started trying to clean the stormwater. So when you look at a site nowadays that's constructed, in order to go through a planning board or approvals from the township, the stormwater is going to be collected, it's going to be detained, the flow rate's going to be monitored, it's going to recharge groundwater, and it's also going to clean the discharge. But in this area, we're dealing with development that occurred before all those regulations. And one of the options we're trying to investigate is introducing stormwater management facilities to address that. So on this exhibit, we show 4 potential basins to try to collect stormwater and store it. One of them is identified as Duke's property because that piece of land is owned by Duke's, so it certainly require negotiations with the township and Duke's farm. The next one moving up or south on 206 would be the DOT jug handle property. And then if we continue to move south, there's the wooded area between Magdalene and Johansson, and then there's the parkland south of Brooks Boulevard. Each one has their own challenges, some of them environmental. There is most likely wetlands involved, at least in 3 of those sites that will restrict the size of the basin and affect permitting issues. Water courses have riparian buffers established by the DEP. So in any of these, we would begin investigations with looking at environmental issues first to see what could be potentially possible, and then move on to the hydrology and hydraulic questions to see what could these basins do. We certainly would not want to expend township funds if the end result isn't going to have some sort of positive impact. The next option would be a joint venture with the county and FEMA, and that is to acquire properties that experience repetitive losses. And FEMA has a grant program, and they establish guidelines on what type of properties are eligible for that. And certainly the properties on Kimberly that are within the 100-year floodplain, as shown by this green line, would fall in that category of being eligible for purchase. So in summary, together with the township, we've explored multiple options. We believe that no one single solution is going to solve all the issues. We also believe, because of the Raritan River, and if you go back to the floodplain map, you'll see the massive impact the river has on our site, that we're not going to be able to address the 100-year flood on Kimberly. That's impacted by the Raritan River. And you can see it's a large floodplain. The work that Hillsborough could do would not have a significant impact on that floodplain. But our goal is to minimize the more frequent events and to minimize the impact to the residents that are not mapped as in within the 100-year floodplain. So with that, we're open to questions and feedback. When we move to the next stage, sometimes understanding some of the events locally is valuable information that we can put into our design decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So we'll take some questions now, and if you would just come up to the mic, we make it easier. Just state your name so Mark knows how to address you. You don't need to give your address. We're not as formal as the planning board or whatever else, but and if, like I said, if you could keep it to 1 or 2 questions, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to ask the same question. And I will thank you, Mark, and for presenting this. One of the things that's not really shown here that was amazing to me is like those outfall pipes that we saw at the Raritan River. When they were first put in, I think they used to be 10 feet or so above the river. Now the river is almost at level of the pipes at stagnant. So that's kind of the problem we have already, right? The water is already at an elevated state before any kind of rain. So we'll start on this side. If you have a question. Okay. Only because you were the only one. I didn't want to go, wait. All right, and we'll start on the left side. Is it Marianne or anyone else who want to come up? Come on up, state your name for us and ask a question. And if there's anything that we can't answer today, we all have your email addresses. Erica got them. That's why we will get back to you with that answer if we can't immediately answer it right now.
Hi, George Messina. I just have a question. If the retention basin that's proposed near the proposed access road, that's okay. That's okay. Yes, that's the one. If that is built, all right. Now you said that there's the drainage is very, very close to that at this time, right? In other words, the existing drainage, would that stop? Would you do anything to that? Would that stay? Or would this retention basin? Right, the pipe.
I could talk like I talk at home, and then maybe everybody can hear me.
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Yes, sir. There's a pipe that comes off of Magna Lane to this spot right here, to a head wall. And then there's an open channel that flows towards Johansson, makes a 90-degree turn, actually joins another water course, as you know, back there, because there's another water course that leads up to the church. And then that ditch, and then right around this area, goes to that graded head wall.
That's the one. That's
Yeah.
the one right there. Now that's going to stay, correct? Whether you build that,
Yes, sir.
if you build that, it's still going to stay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The goal would be to intercept some of that water coming out of this head wall, put it into this basin, hold it back to the appropriate time, and then release it at a slower rate, safer, slower rate, back into the system.
Why don't you send it over to this other one here, the one on the right?
This one.
Yes.
Well, sir, that's a great point, sir. So we're also going to look, because there's a lot of, all this land where my hand is south of here is draining this way. So if we can intercept some of that water, then we can detain it there as
Yeah,
well.
Send it this way.
We
Send it
can't go
over.
the other way. That's against gravity. It goes, the river is this way.
Come on, you're the mayor. You can do this. You can do this.
If I could move water.
Well, the mayor brings up a good point. We can only slow it down and detain it. We can't send it opposite the way the gravity's taking it.
Okay. Remember the warehouse that was proposed? All right. And I went to those meetings too, and they were supposed to expand their retention basin and all that stuff. Well, since I think the warehouse was denied, okay, is that owner still responsible for maintaining and expanding that retention basin that's existing?
They're responsible to put the detention basin back to the original design of 1980, which is what Mr. Mayhew talked about, them waiting to get DEP permits. So they are still responsible, whether they get a warehouse there or not, to restore that detention basin back to the way it's supposed to
Because
be.
that was damaged in, I think it was Ida, and it was never restored since Ida, correct?
I don't know when it was visually damaged, but it was in disarray and disrepair.
Right.
And it is needs, before that,
But it's still in disarray.
they can't do anything until they get the permit from
Oh,
DEP.
gotcha. Okay.
It's wetlands.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Grant. Yeah, that's okay. What was Ida considered? Was that a 100-year or a 500-year flood? Do you know?
I
Mark?
don't know of a number, but the elevations achieved exceeded the 100-year elevations.
Sure. Okay. And the 500 one, I don't think it came all the way up to Kimberly, correct? I
Well,
was looking at the black zone.
from what I heard, the elevations also exceeded what was
They
mapped
would know better.
as, so this green line, as I said, is the 100-year. The 500-year is not that much farther, another foot or so. And
Right.
from what I understand, from observations, the flooding exceeded that.
Okay. What authority do you have as a town to make the property where the disarray basin, like what authority do we have to say you need to go do?
Well, the
I'm not sure I understand the question.
the township engineer
there-
has notified the owners that if they don't address the issue, then they'll be in violation, and there's penalties and fees associated.
Okay. What are those?
And they're, again, willing to do the work. We are just waiting for for the DEP permitting.
And this would be for the 1980s that they're building the basin for?
All the township can do at this point is enforce the original approved design. So that would mean rehabilitate the basin to match the original approved plan.
In the 1980s, what did a detention basin look like? What would their plans be?
Well, it would be similar to what it looks like now, other than
Okay.
they would fix the spillway, the berm that's washed out,
Okay.
which is intercepting flow to the ditch.
Right. They were looking to create something way different than what it is now, or what I imagine it would be if they had the approval for the
For the other
correct?
warehouse? Yeah, I have not seen those plans.
Okay.
Yeah, as the plans that were submitted, from what I understand, they were going to enlarge
Yeah.
the basin just to compensate for the warehouse, not
Address
to-
our
to-
issues.
Yeah.
Yep. The road there, how would you stop? How would you stop cars from going there? And
Are you
from
referring to
entering-
the emergency roadway?
Yeah, that one. And that's porous pavement, I heard, like rocks, gravel, not permanent asphalt? You're
The
thinking?
intent would be to keep it as green as possible. So they have, they're called grass pavers. They're concrete blocks with a lot of open area where grass grows through them.
Okay, I think you know.
Some products such as that. Now, how do we stop people from using it? Well, the normal process is to put bollards
Okay,
at both ends with a chain, and somebody from Department Works would have to open that during an emergency event.
and that's township property, correct?
That whole area is township, correct?
Right. For those basins that are in the blue, they're open basins like the one we have now? Are they closed? They got concrete? How are you holding the water that's there? What do they look like? Right. What would they look like?
They would be what we consider at-grade basins, so they'd be open, as you're saying.
Okay.
They would be naturalized, so they'd be green, vegetation. We want to minimize the maintenance and expense to the township, so they would be mowed like once a year. They'd become meadows. We would just keep trees from growing on the berms.
And then there's outlets for those basins to go then into other retention?
Correct. So if we look at the basin in this area, we would have a manhole intercept the flow from the head wall, go into the basin, and then an outlet structure that would reconnect to the other existing manhole.
Okay, got it. For all of those, basically?
For,
that
for
same
any
structure?
option we pursue, it would involve an inlet and an outlet.
Got it. Probably a question for Mr. Ferreira, but these don't seem cheap and necessarily at a cost, correct? So I hear all of these are sort of proposed. What is what is on the table? Everything's on the table, and then throughout the process for many years to come?
I'll let Anthony, he was directly asked, and I'll follow up if he has,
Sure.
yeah, but
So I think all the options are on the table. They obviously need to be priced out. We continue to look for grants like we've used for a lot of our work that's been done through American Rescue Funds. We look at that, and we continue, especially Hillsborough Township, continue to look for grants and to partner where we can with whether it's state, county, federal, to do some of these projects. But again, depending on where we move forward and where that funding needs to come from, we'll address that when we need to.
And who's making sort of the decision about what to do? Like, this is a very open meeting, and I appreciate it, right? It's sort of like, now we move forward, how, who, where does it go from here?
I'll let John talk a bit, but essentially we've come up with the 5 points that are the most reasonable, right? We assess a value to those. We start to look for grants to make those feasible, and we will take what ones that are the most reasonably done and immediate impact, like the road might be the first thing that we might consider, because that's important, right? The check valves, those are relatively easy to we don't have to acquire land, right? So it's when we have to start acquiring land and getting things, that's when it bogs down, because then even as you can see, to get permitting from DOT
Sure.
takes a long time.
Sure. So we own the land. I mean, that one basin that's right in the back there, that seems like the most approachable one. And this is like a 10-year plan, 20-year plan, 5-year plan, 6-month plan.
All of the above.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
As soon as possible.
so
There we go.
some we can address right away, right? And some we have to look for the funding when you see the cost of these things. And like I said,
And is there-
we've already talked to Congressman Keene, as we did with Malinowski. We've talked to the county. We've talked to the state, because we want to try and partner, because it is kind of a regional area. That's not just Hillsborough, it's everybody. So we're looking for partners for all of it.
Now, I just caught something in your statement, Mayor, that said these were the most reasonable. Are there others that were not considered?
Duke's selling us a whole bunch of property on the other side, that in the middle of their land. I doubt that they'd want to do that.
Is that part of the larger report?
It's there for, we did the study.
Oh, I'm sure. Hey, it's
The other one was like taking all those homes and tearing them down, right? That's unreasonable.
unreasonable.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Next.
Good evening. Can you hear me? There you go. Well, thanks again for continuing this venture, let's say, to try to fix this. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry, John Tatunjan, 150 Johansson Ave. There you go. So I've been living in the house 35 years. We haven't seen too much water like Ida, right? That kind of devastated our homes. The thing I'm noticing, and maybe I'm wrong, you can help me out. We spent the money, which I appreciate. You cleaned out that ditch, right? There's the ditch behind my house, and did you have a chance to walk that ditch or any? I walked the whole ditch. Oh, you did. Okay, great. Oh, perfect. Oh, so perfect. So if you stand in the ditch by my house, and I'm on the back end at 150, you can't even see someone. You can't even, if you're standing in that ditch or a deer's in the ditch, I don't even see, it's like up to here. That's how deep the ditch is. So when the water flows down, and it's supposed to go all the way down Johansson, then across Johansson, right, and then get into the Raritan. If you walk the ditch, now some of the trees are gone and the main debris, you're just walking up. Because if you get 3 houses down, you're like here. So the water, if we don't excavate that and put some kind of pump, because over the years, either people backfilled it. I'm not blaming I'm just saying somehow dirt filled that in. And if we don't get equipment to dig that out and excavate it the right way, and I could tell you, I know that it's not flowing right, because during Ida, I had kayaks and a big planter. They only went 3 houses down. I found them on the street found one in front of Mary Ann's house. I found only one house beyond her was our kayaks on Johansson. So if that water flows the way it's supposed to flow, because our backside, the backside of Johansson, we didn't get any water, the real big impact from the Raritan. Ours was all flash flooding. So put everything outside. If that flowed the right way and didn't come back on us, we wouldn't have probably been impacted by any damage to our homes. I think that over the years that ditch has never been maintained, and we've heard throughout all these building and trying to build back there, let the water flow the way it was intended to flow. But somehow that got diverted. And I know it wasn't one of the proposals, but I like one of the proposals to be to excavate that the right way, put some permanent structure, rocks, whatever in there, so it maintains that flow. The same pathway that you walked, make that permanent. Not like a pipe, just permanent so the water can flow. And then that's what I think could be one of the immediate ways to get the water from not staying on the south side of Johansson and our complex. Because I think that's where the big impact is for the whole complex, is that's getting higher and higher. And if that backside floods, and Kimberly's already flooding, it's just, our values of our homes are going down. So that's my opinion. I don't know if you could take that into consideration or if you already considered that.
No, we certainly can take that in consideration.
Appreciate it. And I don't know, this might be way too much money, but I was gonna say, since the mayor's here, they're having some major legal problems back and forth with that multi-dwelling. Do we approach them? And I know it costs a lot of money. Do we approach them and buy that? Just say to them, hey, you guys are in a bad situation now. They had someone else buy out up that, try to get them out of it, and there's legal going back and forth. Big investment. We make it a nice park. We put some trails back there. We keep the wetlands preserved. I think overall, I mean, that might be an investment for our side of the town. That might be a good one to be at least looking at, you know? So just a thought. Don't want you to spend all the money on Johansson, but some of it.
We would always entertain any action or plan we could, absolutely.
Jim Allen. I live on Johansson at the top of Kimberly Road. And 3 or 4 times in the last 20 years, the water has come up Kimberly to all but the top 2 houses. So they don't lie with the floodplain map. There are office condos and a daycare center between those, the Duke's property and the DOT property. They have what look like pretty small retention basins of their own, not maintained, as far as I can tell. I mean, there's, weeds are higher than me in there. And what I heard from a neighbor who is no longer with us was that water isn't retained at all. The water gets in there and goes straight on out. So there's no way for it to hang around and perhaps soak away slowly. It just seems to flow through, and I think it makes the lack of the ditch behind the Johansson properties worse. The fact that John was mentioning, seems to be true, that as the water moves toward the north, toward the river, that ditch behind the Johansson properties does less and less and less good. And eventually, when you get up toward Gale Road and Kimberly Road, it comes out of that ditch, through lawns, onto Johansson Avenue. So I think there's merit to looking at that, and looking, the retention basins behind those properties are not mentioned here because they're not part of what we're necessarily looking at, but they may be contributing factors. Last question, like the Duke's property retention basin, is that, you said it's at grade, meaning the field will stay at its current level on the perimeter? How deep does the retention basin? Is it actually dug out?
Well, the goal would be able to dig these ditches, the basins out as deep as we can. So
Till
that-
you hit water?
Well, you would want, seasonal high water table, right? And then your outlet is limited by whatever the elevation is of the pipe we're connecting to. But the deeper we can build these, the more storage you're gonna have.
Because the level of that Duke's property field is at least 8 feet higher than my backyard. So
So we're taking out at least 8 feet of,
keep a good wall between.
okay, thank you. And to answer a quick question of yours, I was unable to access the detention facilities. The courtyard is fenced off, and the daycare facility, so I wasn't able to observe the condition of those 2 basins, but maybe that's something the township can look into.
Mary Ann Soade, 142 Johansson. The only question I have, and this also goes back to the Harvard Way plan, was the reason Ida was so bad for us is because the detention basin on the Harvard Way property wasn't maintained and it failed. So my question is, wouldn't it be cost effective for the town to have some small department that did checks on all these properties that have detention basins year round to make sure they're maintaining these basins? Because, I mean, it's great to go up there, you're approved, you're building it correctly, but then as the years go on, they're not maintaining it like they're supposed to, or maybe some are. But I think that would be a cost-effective, long-term idea to keep the stormwater management under control, make sure the owners are maintaining those basins. That's all I wanted to say.
Great point, and the DEP has awoken to that issue as well. And so detention basins in any facility, stormwater facility constructed in the last several years, is required to have a maintenance program on file with the township. But again, we're dealing with some facilities that don't have those restrictions, unfortunately.
So the ones that do have the requirement, is it an annual report or something like that? Or
In
does
order-
anyone spot check, like come in, okay, we're going to, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know that department. So.
Well, in order to grant their approval, whether it's a commercial site or a residential or a warehouse or whatever it is, they have to submit as part of the stormwater management plan a maintenance and operations plan that's on file with the township.
Mm-hmm.
How that's enforced,
I don't think it is.
I'm not sure exactly.
We'll check on the enforcement, but we're also in the middle of stormwater rehabilitation with our DPW. We put out a bid, there's, maybe, I don't remember if you were involved in the survey, but we surveyed all the outfalls, all the stormwater throughout the town as part of the state mandated act. And the work that has to be done under that is pretty extensive, and our DPW department is doing that now, fixing up head walls and where they can, and I think we may even have to go outside to get some of it done because there's work that has to be done in other parts of the town. So we're in the midst of that, and that's, you know, the enforcement is one thing, but taking care of what we have to take care of is something that we're doing right now.
Yeah, as Committeeman Ciccarelli mentioned, we are in the process now of our DPW and parks, as well as the engineering does at least 200 of the basin inspections as well, and we get after the folks that are not following the rules, and they receive those violations as well. But we
Okay.
continue to get unfunded mandates by the DEP to do more work and more work with no funding and no resources. So as part of their goals and objectives, because I look at them every year, they had over 200 last year, the engineering department, at least. So.
Has the township looked into, or I know you've heard of it, the stormwater utility option of developing a stormwater utility where it would cost residents a little extra, but it would actually be a managed
You're talking about a fee or a tax to
tax. It would be a stormwater tax.
I'm ducking because I'm not sure everybody behind you. To be honest, no. And I'd have to see what what it would cover and what we could use it for, because a lot of those things sound good, but we are very limited as to what we can use it for.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, any new tax we would have to go out to referendum for that. So it wouldn't be my decision. It would be the people sitting in the chairs behind you.
Understood. But Hillsborough's a lot of flooding, so they might think it's worth it.
Not disagreeing with you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, Tom Sulich. Question for you, that ditch, as they said, ends right at Kimberly. And then what happens? It just ends. I walk back there. Is there a pipe that feeds under Johansson Avenue and then down to another gully?
You're correct. The ditch does end, as you said, right about here. And there's probably somebody here that lives right in that area that can point better than I can, but when I remember walking it, it comes to an end. There is a head wall with a 12-inch pipe that takes any flow in that ditch and sends it to the 42-inch pipe. So from that point on, the stormwater has to go in the 42-inch, that runs out to the Raritan.
So was that checked to, that it's clear, that 12-inch pipe?
That was part of the clearing program a year ago, but that needs periodic maintenance. Yes, sir.
Does that need to be bigger than 12-inch going to the 42-inch?
That's a great question. I think that's something we, in the next step, should look at.
On the retention basins, how does the flow out work on any retention basins? Is it an overflow where it flows out, or is there a lower pipe in the retention basin, maybe halfway through or something like that?
Well, on the typical outlet structure, it would look like a square manhole inside the basin, and you would have openings in this one side of this outlet structure. So you might have a 6-inch diameter hole drilled through the bottom, and then you might have a larger weir opening a little higher up, and then you'd have an emergency grate at the top. That way you can analyze different size storms, such as the 2-year, the 10-year, and the 100-year, and have them come out at a design rate. Those flows would enter the structure, and then going out the rear would be like a 30-inch pipe or something, based on the flow.
Okay, so once it fills, it doesn't sit there, it slowly drains out regardless?
Correct. It could take 2 or 3 days to drain out.
Okay, so if we're saturated and then we get a hurricane or something, it's not flowed, and then depending on overflow. Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharon Bragi, 133 Taylor. My question is about the pipe that ends at Kimberly Road. I grew up in that neighborhood and used to play in a ditch that ran between 120 and 122 Johansson. That ditch turned the water from the ditches behind the houses on Johansson and put it into the ditch that ran behind the houses on Kimberly Road down to the river. The flooding was bad on Dukes Parkway for a couple of the homes that are kind of almost abandoned, starting to be fixed up. But only 1 or 2 houses on Kimberly got a little bit of water in their rec rooms, if anything. That got filled in. So is there no more pipe that turns and goes down Kimberly from the ditches? Because it sounds like that ditch now goes straight down to Dukes Parkway.
Where did you say you live, Sharon?
On Taylor Avenue.
Okay. Well, you bring up a really hot topic. And not knowing where everybody lives, we got to be careful. But and I think a couple other residents have touched upon this. If you look at the contours underneath, the natural gradient comes down this ditch and then turned years ago to a swale between Kimberly and Gale,
Yes.
and it ran all the way down to Dukes. I don't know when this happened, but at some point years ago,
It was in the 70s, long
Okay.
time ago.
I wasn't even born. No, I'm just kidding. But you can tell that something happened here. The storm system on Johansson has a low point right near that area we're discussing.
It does.
But instead of draining towards, I'll call it Kimberly, the pipe is going backwards towards the ditch and the 42-inch pipe. Now, I can imagine in an extreme event, that pipe is pitched towards the 42, but I bet your water's flowing the other way. I bet your water's flowing from the back here to the street, possibly coming out of the inlet, and then once it submerges this low area, water probably then starts flowing down that ditch in a significant enough storm. That's my guess. And I do notice that there is an easement on these properties.
It was, my aunt and uncle lived at 122, so it was between 120 and 122. There's a wider area. It used to be a little bridge that went over the road and a big pipe that went under, because we could walk through it. But the flooding wasn't so bad then, and I wonder if by moving that pipe and making it go toward the river, they made it worse.
Well, that's a great question. It's certainly, as this last gentleman noticed, and I think the last 2 gentlemen have noticed, you have a very significant ditch moving north, where one gentleman mentioned you could put a deer, and then it starts getting smaller, and then it ends. So where's that water going to go?
Because it used to turn and go down the other ditch.
Yeah,
Which, if that was made deeper,
It's a, yeah, it's a great point, and it's where the natural course of the water wants to go.
Mhm.
We just have to be careful. What impact would that have to these homes on Johansson and on Kimberly?
well, 122 Johansson, my aunt and uncle were original owners since the neighborhood were built. They never had water in their home until after that was filled in. And then they started to get water once they built the courtyard and stuff behind them. Nobody talks about the ditch that runs behind the properties on Kimberly. And it seems like that's where the water wants to go. And from what I understand, my friends who lived at 109 and finally sold and got out, the water was almost a river. It was just rushing down behind their properties and then coming in from their backyards. It just has nowhere to go. But if that ditch was deeper, where there was a pipe put in underneath that ditch, like they used to have on Johansson, crossing over under near Kimberly,
Yeah.
it might help.
Well, you bring up some really great points, Sharon. You're not a civil engineer, are you?
No, I just played in those woods all my life.
Yeah.
You know?
She stayed at Holly once. Do you know when that pipe was closed? Do you remember? Okay. I don't remember that pipe, but I didn't live there. Okay. Yes, sir.
Kudos to Sharon, because she's absolutely correct. But I just have one question about the ditch. Oh, I'm sorry, George Messina? I was the first one there. Sorry, you put two there, whatever. Where the ditch ends, you said there was a 12-inch then that tied into the 40-inch pipe? You think that 12 inch is a little undersized?
If we're trying to just collect the water on the street and bring it to the 42, it may be close. If we're trying to do what Sharon's saying used to happen, then yeah, it's not sized to pick up the ditch and send it towards Kimberly.
Okay, because I just couldn't see the 12 inch seemed to be so small to me. I don't know. But Sharon's correct, as far as that house, that guy has a stone driveway, all right, next to his garage. And when it rains, after that thing, there's no stone left. And that little thing across the street that looked like a little ditch was like the Colorado River. It was ridiculous how much water was drawn there, so.
You're talking about the area between Kimberly and Gale.
Just where Sharon was talking about.
Yeah. That's the only area I didn't walk. It was, I felt like I was imposing on people's properties, and it was very thickly wooded, so I didn't walk down that
If you
ditch.
go all the way to Duke's Parkway East, where that little creek or swale or whatever you want to call it, there's nothing there, I says, until it rains. Then it's forget it. I mean, those houses in there were destroyed, and you would never know it. You would never even see it unless you really looked. But they're terrible. I was right. Sharon's right on the money.
Sharon gets gold star. Anyone else? One more? Okay.
Sorry, Tom Sulich again. The academy that's sitting there, that when I walked down the ditch, it looked like there were pipes coming from that directly into the ditch from that academy. Yeah.
I noticed those RCP pipes, they might have been 18-inch diameter pipes. John can tell you, he installed those pipes. And from what John was saying, they look like they were just anticipation of some future connection that was never made. So they're dry pipes.
So the flow from there is not going into that ditch?
I saw debris, leaf debris sitting in those pipes. I don't think water is moving through them.
Anyone else? All right, we'll take closing comments. You want to say anything?
I mean, yeah, this is obviously your neighborhood. I know Mark spelled it out, but it's, you know what we're talking about. So we appreciate everybody coming. I think we did get a couple more good ideas that we can consider and work into the final report that's going to be published. So, yeah, I think this firsthand knowledge is why we had this call. Why we had this call. So used to that these days. Why we had this town hall meeting. You know, I've got several notes and things to make sure we've considered and you know, work into the options. So I really appreciate it, and you know, thanks for coming out.
And Mayor, I would just say, if you didn't sign the sheet, let us know. I'll make sure we email everybody, and for the residents that couldn't make it, we'll make sure we put it up on the website. That's why we're filming it tonight. And I appreciate the history. History is always important, so you know, you can come up with all the engineering, but people that live there and grew up there and understand that, so we appreciate the feedback, so I think that's helpful for Mark and the team. But we're going to continue, as the mayor had stated, to continue to look for grants and ways that we can fund this. So it's something we want to help with seriously, and we're trying to make some of those inroads now.
Thanks, Anthony. Second phase is done, right? Third phase is coming with the actual action plan grant. And then start looking, as Mr. Ferrara said, with the funds and the ability to pay for it. We will have the full report available shortly. We will stay for about 5 minutes or so. If there's something that you want to talk to Mark or myself or Mr. Chicorella or anything about, again, you know, kind of on the side. But thanks for coming out. Thank you, Mark, for coming out and presenting this in a way I think we all could understand, which is where none of us are engineers. At least I'm not an engineer. He's an engineer. But we do understand the problem. Our eyes tell us that there's an issue, and we want to fix it. So thank you all for coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.